I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about connective tissue health and explain what is happening in bodies that have increased risk factors for connective tissue disease, genetics, labels that like HEDS, classical EDS, things like that. What is happening and why do we have this trifecta of MCAS, EDS, POTS, or the pentad, or the infinity tab that, that I call it? And it's this domino effect that happens because of failing connective tissue health. And part of the problem that we have in modern day medicine is that a lot of what connective tissue health is and the things to work on it is considered Eastern medicine. And I want to bridge that gap a little bit. I don't feel like I practice in Eastern or Western medicine. I feel like I practice connective tissue health, which is really the gap between the two. And hopefully we can come together soon because this interstitial space that we talk about for many thousands of years in the Eastern medicine is what we need to be talking about from a Western medicine lens for people with connective tissue disease. So this is really important. And I know that there has been talk about this new interstitium that's been found. It's not new. It's been described by Eastern medicine for thousands of years. It's also not new, really, in Western medicine. In Western medicine, Dr. Pischinger back in, I think the 70s was when the book came out on the extracellular matrix and ground substance, was talking about the interstitium in human health and disease, just not using the same language that we're using now. So no, this has actually been around for a while. This interstitial space is really what determines the overall connective tissue health and really the health of the individual. Because the interstitium that we thought was just filler space where, oh, it's just between tissues, and that's all it was. When we've made comments like that, we have been horribly incorrect in medicine in the past, like glial cells. We thought that they were just filler and cushion in the neurological system, but actually they play a huge role in neuroimmune stabilization. Never talking about the body in connective tissue space, this interstitial space plays a role in neuroimmune regulation. This interstitial space is also a type of extracellular matrix that we have in the body, so it's just a different type of connective tissue space that really holds a lot of function. Now, in this interstitial space, this is where a lot of the pathogens and toxins and inflammatory mediators are. This interstitial space that is a connective tissue, collagens type 1, 2, 3, 5, and 11 are the primary structural stabilizers, although we need a lot more research on what the human body is actually made of in regards to the extracellular matrix to verify the certain connective tissue pieces or the parts of the extracellular matrix. But if somebody has a connective tissue disease, this interstitial space can also be structurally compromised, which will affect function, meaning that the more that you fill with inflammation, wherever it might come from, toxins, pathogens, EMF waves, stress causes mediator responses, mast cell degranulation from corticotropin releasing hormone, and it expresses mediators that can cause neuroinflammation and inflammation in this interstitial space. So basically anything that causes inflammation can end up in this interstitial space, this type of connective tissue, in people with increased risk factors for connective tissue disease. And they are not able to handle that bucket analogy of things filling and filling and filling without treating the interstitial space. And the treating component, we have considered alternative medicine, Eastern medicine, so we don't have a lot of people jumping onto the bandwagon of understanding connective tissue health and hygiene. We can talk, working on mold detox or Lyme or EMF waves or, the stress component from neuroimmune. It's these things that we actually do need to teach somebody from a young age that those with increased connective tissue risk factors need to address connective tissue hygiene, just like brushing your teeth on a daily basis. When you're exposed to a virus, what do you do to help recover from the virus because that interstitial space might not be able to handle the inflammatory loads for some people? The bucket is overflowing. And that's where we hear stories of people with connective tissue disease that get to a spot and they're like, I seemed okay until, and something happened. And it happens over and over again and the dominoes start to fall. So this connective tissue hygiene piece is incredibly important for stabilizing the human body. This interstitial space also is where mast cells live. It's also where autonomic nervous system endings exist. And this is the neuroimmune stabilization and homeostasis of the body is a connective tissue space. So if we are not consistently caring for this connective tissue, we can lead to pathology and disease progression. And the dominoes start to fall and people get worse. And I think the failure that happens in functional medicine, integrative medicine, these things that we consider alternative medicine, is focusing on a particular toxin or inflammatory process that happens, right? But it's not just mold. Mold and viruses are known catalysts to other human diseases, but somebody's primary issue could be a stress component. So it's teaching somebody dealing with all of the inflammation in our environment today. How do we reduce that in that particular person? We have to consider all of the things. And it might sound like over-treatment, but it's not, because all of this goes into the interstitial space. We have to teach human beings how to stabilize connective tissue regarding hygiene and reducing inflammatory loads rather than just letting it build up and getting to a disease state, and how we treat what we consider the Western side of things, wait until a disease state happens and then we treat it. Well, you've already started overflowing the bucket. There's all of this stuff that's been building up for some people in decades. And this is where it looks like we're becoming sicker and more people are developing EDS, HEDS. And it's because more inflammation is going into this interstitial space and we don't talk about connective tissue hygiene. We just try to treat disease. So hopefully Eastern and Western medicine will start to come together and realize that connective tissue is that intermediate space where we have to recognize that connective tissue hygiene and working on inflammation is key to human health for people that have increased risk factors. And if you don't, you end up leading to things like mast cell activation syndrome because they exist in that space and there's a lot of stuff going on and it gets backed up. Autonomic nervous system can become dysregulated because it's integrated into that space and it's constantly on a feedback loop getting signals. It can become dysregulated. Okay, so that's the trifecta. But then if you do not help somebody, the dominoes will continue to fall and it will affect other tissue in the body, including neurological tissue, including vascular tissue, and this is where we're seeing people with neurovascular presentations, multiple vascular compressions. It's not a local problem alone. It can have local contributing factors, but the problem is a systemic connective tissue health imbalance. Nobody has taught us to take care of our connective tissue because we consider it alternative medicine and that inflammation doesn't really play a huge role and that we don't have to deal with pathologies that pop up. They're just going to leave our body naturally, not for people with connective tissue disorders and diseases potentially with that increased risk factor. So mast cell activation syndrome, autonomic dysregulation, all of those things are because of this interstitial space becoming dysregulated, which is just a type of connective tissue in itself. So please spread the word. This is in the science. It's not my opinion. I talk about this all the time. There is science on this. It's proven within our connective tissue space. Tina Wang has done great research that shows these spaces in between, especially fascial layers, adipose tissue, are having neuroimmune reactions. That is the interstitium. The space between is the interstitium. It becomes sticky. It becomes dysregulated because we don't have the best structural components depending on the body that we are born with. But it's not one thing, it's all of the things that we're exposed to, and we need to start normalizing the conversation of connective tissue health and hygiene. I'm hoping our doctors start to understand this is really important to understand before surgical procedures, before any sort of procedure, because we want to normalize the connective tissue response as well. And actually, a lot of times we can reduce symptoms by helping connective tissue health and hygiene and regulating connective tissue structure and function if we're going to apply a surgery or procedure to somebody's body. So it's just science, and it's not alternative medicine. It's the bridging the gap between Eastern and Western, and hopefully we can have both sides coming together at some point. Thanks for listening.